Hi everyone. So thank you for turning up for this presentation. As you can see, I'm Vincent Kelleher. I'm a software engineer in the Gaia-X CTO team. I've been working for a year now with this wonderful team. I've worked on OpenID for verifiable credentials for the last few months. I've seen the drafts evolve and go from draft 11 to 12, 13, 14. So I've built quite an understanding of this specification, and today I'd like to share it with you to bring you on a journey through OpenID for VC. So how am I going to present it to you? So the first thing, I'm going to present what is OpenID for VC and the big lines in a way. Then I'll present the roles and interactions that happen within OpenID for VC. Then we'll do issuing, presenting, and dynamic credential requests. And then the last slides are going to be just a vision that you could have of the future with OpenID for VC if it's correctly implemented and shared by the world. So, to start, what is OpenID for VC? It's an umbrella specification. I'll explain in the next slides why I call it an umbrella specification. It is based on OAuth2 and OpenID. So OpenID Connect, sorry. OAuth2 is built for authorization, and OpenID Connect is for authentication. It's a specification that's written by the OpenID Foundation, and it's used to share credentials through cryptographically secure transport. So, OAuth2, to start with OAuth2, it's an authorization protocol which has multiple extensions. So when you start reading the specifications from OAuth2, don't expect to have a single RFC. You're going to be going everywhere. There are all different extensions for new features, security implementations, and many other things that you can find in other RFCs. OpenID Connect is an authentication protocol that is built on OAuth2. I'm discussing about these protocols because OpenID for VC, as I remind you, is built upon these. So, OpenID for VC, just like OAuth2, can have defined profiles. You have different flavors in a way of implementing OAuth and OpenID for VC. You can choose to have direct post JWT. You can have, I don't know, JAR, which are secure authentication, authorization requests. So you can define a profile to say, I'm compatible with such a technology that uses OAuth2. And it's going to be a very important part, these profiles, because they allow interoperability between ecosystems. So I was saying it was an umbrella specification. Why did I call it like that? Because it has two main specifications within the umbrella specification. So you've got one that's for verifiable credential issuance, and one that is for verifiable presentations. As you understood probably, one is to collect credentials from an issuer, and the other one is to present the credentials that you have in your wallet. And as a reminder, both specifications support machine-to-human interactions and machine-to-machine interactions. They are extensions of OAuth2, which is massively used on internet at the moment, and it has already been proven for machine-to-machine interactions.
1 second.
Yep.
Yeah, 1 second, please. Can you understand me? Is it on? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Very well. Because this part is contested. I don't know, but there are various people discussing that internally and externally, and they deny that. They say OpenID for VC is not usable for machine to machine for various reasons, mostly the wrong ones. Like IoT data is so complex but authentication has nothing to do of the participants, nothing to do with the complexity of data you base on that. So there is a lot of confusion and FAT. Do you know, is that written in the standard, or that it's machine to machine? Because
it is. So that it's a great question. The OpenID for VC specifications are directly written in the introduction that they are extensions of OAuth2. OAuth2, if you go to see in that specification, you'll see that there are client ID grants which are used for machine to machine.
Yeah, some people obviously have potentially have another agenda to pursue. So yeah, and we can demonstrate it anyway.
Yeah. We can demonstrate.
We support the claim fully. I just want to make you aware that there are other participants in the data space ecosystem service, whatever, who maybe you have to fight for that. Yeah, but I think most of the claims around that are wrong, or provably wrong. But please, then, if you have such a conversation, move them to me, and we are happy to learn something. Maybe,
thank you for for that. And as a reminder, between us in this room, this presentation is made to share the knowledge that I've built on this technology. But if you have reactions about it, if you want to challenge me, to challenge the specification, please do it. We're looking for feedback, and we want to have something as really a standard that is recognized by everyone and that's undeniable. So, the roles and interactions. This is in the case of OAuth2, but it also applies to OpenID4VC. We've got a client, we've got the resource owner, the resource server, and the authorization server. What does the client do? The client is the one that initiates the authorization flow. It's the party that's requesting the resource, so it's the one that will want to consume the resource at the end. It's the only one that interacts with all the other roles that I'm going to present later on. It can be an application, it can be a server, it can be any device or service. So that's very important. Then you've got the resource owner, who is the owner of the protected resource that the client wants access to. So it's capable of granting access to the protected resource on behalf of the client. It can be a natural person, which we call an end user, a legal person, a server, or whatever. It's a pretty wide specification. Then we've got the authorization server, which grants the client access to the resource server. So not to the resource directly because it doesn't own it. It authenticates the resource owner, and it issues the famous access tokens you must have heard about in OAuth2 to the client. And the last one is the resource server. It's the service that's hosting the owner's resource securely, and it's capable of delivering that resource if you prove that you have the authorization to have access to that resource with an access token. Okay, so I'm just going to do a bird's eye view of the interactions you can have. The client is going to ask for the authorization to the resource owner to access the resource. Say, do you allow me to access the resource? The resource owner is going to say, okay, I give you the authorization. Then it's going to send that authorization to the authorization server saying, listen, the resource owner said I can access it, so please deliver me that famous access token, which is going to give if everything is fine. And then it goes to call the resource server to say, okay, I've got an access token, which means that the resource owner is okay, the authorization server is okay, please give me the resource. That's abstract. If we go into something that's a bit less abstract, I've got an application. Let's say that I'm going to build, I'm going to print your favorite pictures. I want your holiday album that's stored on a photo service, whatever service you want. I'm going to ask you, John Doe, do you allow me? Then I go to the auth server of that photo gallery. I get the access token, and with the access token, I get your holiday album. I'm not stealing the resource from you. I got all the authorizations. and it's secure. So we're going to start with credential issuance. So this one is OpenID for verifiable credential issuance. That's the specification. The goal is to cryptographically bind a verifiable credential to a holder. So for that, we're going to have to present proof. We're going to have to give all the information that's necessary to say, okay, I can get the protected resource, and it's going to be my resource, and nobody can change that. So in our case, in the implementation that we've done as a proof of concept, we use DidWeb. DidWeb is explicitly supported in the specification of OpenID4VC. And if we have to simplify everything, we can say that the DidWeb is a username and that the private key that's linked to that DidWeb is a password that allows decentralization and control of your own identity. There are two flows that exist. There's the authorization code flow, which is more like a vanilla OAuth 2 flow, and a pre-authorized code flow, which I'll present later on. That's a flow that's lighter and that allows to say, I've already been authorized by the service, so please give me the resource. And for example, in a real Gaia-X use case, it's perfectly suited for a notary to say, for the Gaia-X notary to say, okay, here is the legal person credential that we can issue. So, in the case of OpenID4VC, the client that I presented previously is going to become what we call a wallet. So it's going to be the holder of that credential. So wallets interact with issuers to collect credentials. The credentials are stored. The issuer will remain the same, and the credential won't be modified. The wallet is just storage for the credentials, is secure storage. Another thing, the resource server is what we're going to call an issuer now. So the issuer produces the verifiable credential. It binds it to the holder, to the end user's private key, public key, sorry. And the credentials are signed by the issuer's private key. And the issuers are a resource server, but they can also be the authorization server. In most cases, they'll be the same server. This is the authorization code flow. So that is just a screenshot from the RFC, from the specification. And if that's okay for you, I'm going to guide you through with a real example where I'm going to specify each case. It's going to take some time, but at the end you should understand the whole thing. So the credential issuer is going to start by sending a credential offer to the wallet. So it can be sent in the shape of a QR code that the end user is going to scan with its wallet for human-to-machine interaction. But it can also be, when you call the credential issuer at the start, you're going to tell them, okay, my wallet endpoint is here. Please send me the credential offer for a Gaia-X VAT ID, for example. In this credential offer, we're going to have the credential issuer, which is going to allow us to identify who is the credential issuer. We're going to have credential configuration IDs, which are configurations that allow you to request a certain credential. So here we know that the issuer knows how to issue a VAT ID and the Gaia-X compliance credential. And then we have the grants. So here in the case of an authorization code flow, we have authorization code. It just allows the wallet to know that we're going to do this credential issuance process with the authorization code flow. Then the wallet is going to collect the credential issuer's metadata. So there you're going to have the credential issuer as usual. The credential endpoint, which is critical, it is the resource server endpoint where you're going to send your access token to say I want this protected resource. Then you have some customization below where you can display the name of the issuer, a logo or whatever you want to show. and the credential configurations that it supports. Okay, now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. So the wallet is going to call the authorization server, to say, okay, I got this from the resource owner. Now I'd like to have authorization to ask for a credential. So it's going to send a request that's going to have a client ID, which you can see as a did web. So that allows the decentralization part for the authentication, and a request that is a JWT, more exactly a JWS, as it's not encrypted. And within this request, we're going to have the client ID, the redirect URI, which is going to be used to send the access code to the wallet. We'll have the wallet issuer, which is used only in OpenID for VP. We have all other metadata, and we have two elements. We've got the authorization details, which say, I want a Gaia-X VAT ID, and the state. A state is an opaque token in a way that the issuer cannot interpret or get any data from, and it's just used for the statelessness of the wallet. I'll show you later in a demonstration. Once the authorization server authenticated everyone and said, okay, it's good, it's gonna redirect the wallet to the previously cited redirect URI with the access code and the state. And then we can go to the token request. So the token request is going to reuse the code that was sent previously. There's the redirect URI and the client ID that are necessary to make sure that it's the same person that's doing the request as the previous one. And as usual, the authorization details. So you see there's a lot of repetition. That's something that is bugging me a bit with this protocol, but you have to imagine that in this case we have an authorization server that's the same as the resource server, but you can have cases where you have multiple authorization servers for one resource server. I hope I didn't lose everybody. Am I going too fast? Too slow? Okay. So then you get the token response once it says everything's okay. So now the authorization server is telling you, I know who you are, I trust you, you can get that credential. So you get the access token, the famous access token, which is a JWT. You get a client nonce, which is to avoid replay attacks. And as usual, the authorization details to say which credential you are requesting. The interesting part is this. At the top, with a HTTP header, an authorization HTTP header, we send the access token, which means that we're totally authenticated and authorized. And we ask the credential issuer, can I get the credential? And for this, we're going to provide the credential identifier we want and the proof. The proof is going to be the material that is going to allow the cryptographical binding of the output credential to the holder. So this is a JWT that is signed with the private key of the holder. And within that JWT, you have a nonce, which is the one you could see previously, to say it's not, it is the person that did the first request. And I forgot that, but Ivan said it a while ago. In the headers of the JWT, we're going to have key ID, which is the ID of the key that signed the JWT. Now everything is fine. The credential issuer said, okay, I have identified you, everything is good. And it's going to send the credential back in the shape of a VC JOT in our implementation, but it can also be ISO MDL or whatever. And you have a CNonce that is here that can be used for later for doing that process again. You can just call the credential issuer with the same access token and that CNonce, and it will avoid you to have to do all the process we did before. Then you have the pre-authorized code flow. Don't worry, I'm not going through the whole thing again. It's the same flow, just at the start the credential offer is a bit different. Instead of having an authorization code grant, we're going to have a pre-authorized code in it, which is you have the pre-authorized code and a transaction code that allow you to say I'm already authenticated with the authorization server. That's a lighter flow. The rest of the flow is the same as the previous one, but the difference is you have a transaction code that's sent through a secondary channel for more security, like two-factor authentication. Okay, so in a nutshell, OpenID4VC brings in a new credential offer endpoint, which allows you to collect the credential. You have a new metadata endpoint, a new credential offer endpoint as well for compared to OAuth2. The credential offers, as I stated previously, can be sent through a QR code that you scan with your wallet, or they can be sent through an HTTP request. By default, the specification has support for VC-JOT, ISO-MDL, and SD-JOT-VC. And there is support for multiple credential issuance and deferred credential issuance. Is everyone okay? Do you have questions for this part? And I understand it's pretty intensive. Sorry for that. Then we have credential presentation. I promise it's lighter. The credential presentation is done through OpenID for verifiable presentations. It only uses the authorization request and response part of OAuth2. The verifiable credentials are sent through a verifiable presentation, so you can have multiple verifiable credentials in a single response. And you can use it with SIOP v2, but I won't go into that detail. And in a Gaia-X use case, OpenID4VP can be used to present any Gaia-X credential at the summit, for example. If you want to, I don't know, if you want to register for the summit or whatever, you can just present it through this protocol. This time the authorization server becomes a verifier. So the verifier is the one that requests the credentials, and they are in charge, and it's written in the specification, of verifying that the verifiable presentations that contain the VCs are valid, and that each verifiable credential within that VC is also valid. Because, as a reminder, the wallet stores the verifiable credentials but doesn't modify them. It can only send them through a verifiable presentation that is signed by the wallet. So here we have a same device flow, and we have also a cross-device flow. So the same device flow is going to be more for machine to machine, and cross-device flow is going to be for human to machine, where you're going to be able to scan with your phone, your smartphone wallet. You're going to be able to scan a QR code and start the exchange. So this specification is built on diff's presentation exchange 2.00, which is format and transport agnostic. Diff is the Decentralized Identity Foundation, if I remember well. We use presentation definitions, which I'll present in the next slides, that are used by the verifier to query credentials, and presentation submissions, which I'll present in the slide after that, which are used to locate where the requested credentials are in the wallet's response. A presentation definition looks like this. It has a unique ID that has to be that is required. And then you have input descriptors. Each input descriptor is going to represent a verifiable credential you want. And you're going to have constraints within these descriptors, which are going to say how the wallet must collect that verifiable credential within its storage. So if we want to do an analogy in a way, this is the query language for verifiable credentials in a way. So you can, for example, you have there it's type string, so we say that we want a type that is a VAT ID. And then in the response of the wallet, you're going to have presentation submissions that are going to say that for this definition ID, we're going to have a descriptor map that says, okay, we have the credential with the ID that you give previously in the input descriptor, so the VAT ID. It's going to be with a VC.jot format in the verifiable credential at this index. So it allows to map where the credentials are in the response. So that was credential issuance. Then we have credential presentation. And then there's another use case that has been specified recently in the specification. It's the case where I'm going to ask for a specific credential, but to get that credential, I need to show that I have another credential to identify that I'm the owner and that everything is fine. So this is what we call dynamic credential requests. So it's going to be a quick switch between OpenID for VC issuance and OpenID for verifiable presentations. It only works with the authorization code flows. And at the moment, it's not clearly specified. It's still in discussion. There's a discussion that's interesting on the OpenID for VC repository with the team from the EUDI wallet of the German BMI that's discussing on that. So at the moment, what I'm going to show you in the next slide is just an implementation idea of how it can be done. In the Gaia-X use case, it can be used when you're asking for a compliance credential and that you have to present all your credentials to say, okay, this is the service offering with such a data center, etc. That's a use case. So we take the authorization code flow, and it's in this part that everything happens, where we're going to switch to OpenID for verifiable presentations. So I'm going to just fly over this sequence diagram. What you're going to do is when you ask for the authorization, you're going to do the usual process, but instead of answering with the authorization code, the authorization server is going to say, I'm missing credentials. Please send me extra credentials for me to be able to authorize you. And then you're going to respond on a specific endpoint with the missing credentials with the OpenID for VP response. And then it's going to send you the access token. Okay, so I'm sorry for those who found that everything was heavy for now. Let's make things a bit lighter and embark with me on a visualization of what the future could be if OpenID for VC was generalized and implemented by multiple ecosystems. As a reminder, at the moment, there are multiple use cases that are promoted, but that are human to machine. That's great for a natural person. That's awesome for everybody here. But there are enterprise cases that can exist and that exist at the moment and that are not possible because they're not implemented and that use machine to machine. So just imagine if wallets are not only on your smartphone, a smartphone app that you have to install, but wallets are now hosted on cloud services. They're hosted by corporations or by companies or whatever, and we could call them cloud wallets. These cloud wallets, they'll give the power to corporations to give power of attorney to key employees, to subsidiaries, or anybody they want, which means that anybody from the company can, that has the authorization, can collect credentials or can present credentials on behalf of that company. And if that is possible, it means that we can accelerate processes by having faster credential issuance for onboarding, for signing contracts, for whatever you want. If you need to present a credential, you can do it. through a cloud service. So I was talking about OpenID4VC profiles. That is the main entry point at the moment to define a profile. That's what we're working on at Gaia-X. It's to explain which technologies you're using, which technologies you're compatible with. And once you do that, it means that ecosystems can discuss, can exchange with the same technologies and have a universal secure protocol. That's what we're interested in at Gaia-X. Decentralization, as I showed you, can become a standard practice through DIDs. So that's another important part. And you can add new features, as everything is based on OAuth2. You can add new security features. You can add new use cases through extensions, as OpenID4VC is fully compatible with the OAuth2 specification. So thank you for following up to now. This is the last slide. Good job, you survived this presentation. So now what I'm going to propose is with this QR code you can get our proof of concept. It's a proof of concept that the lab team has been working on for the last month and or so, where we just have a proof of concept of machine-to-machine exchanges using OpenID4VC. So if that's okay for you, I can do a quick demonstration of that proof of concept. So we did a basic interface for what you could imagine is a basic cloud wallet. That could be the interface. Everything in the repository that you see behind that QR code that I showed just before is made for demonstration purposes. Do not put them into production. Anyway, you couldn't put them into production. But they're just to show you what you could do and give code examples of how things can be implemented. So I have the feeling that I'm going to have a demo effect. Be ready. So the first thing I'm going to demonstrate, and you're going to have to trust me, because you can have a look at the code that's behind, but with this presentation, you won't have any tangible proof that everything is done with OpenID, but trust me on that, the code is on the repository. So here I'm going to request a basic VAT-ID credential through OpenID for VC issuance. So what it did, it called the issuer, saying, listen, I want a VAT ID. This is the endpoint of my wallet. Please send me a credential offer, and the wallet is going to take care of it from there. So the wallet received the credential offer, did all the exchanges, and a VAT ID has been issued. As you can see, it's VC JOT. And that VAT ID is set, so it's localhost because it's running on my local machine at the moment. That credential is cryptographically bound to the audience, which is the wallet. So that means that the exchange that happened had all the elements I showed you before, where the proof is provided and the DIDs are used to issue that credential through OpenID4VC protocol. Now we're going to use the mix I displayed previously, the dynamic credential request. So when I'm going to click on the approve button, I'm going to start an OpenID4VC exchange flow. And in the authorization part, it's going to say, okay, I need the VAT ID that you have, that you got previously, to tell you that it's approved and that everything is right. For that, I created a fake approved registration number. Just it's a fake entity. Don't look for it in the ontology. And when I click on approve, I collect my approved registration number, which you can see here, which has the ID, the VAT ID that I sent previously. This is just to show you how the fake wallet we built works. It uses the real OpenID for VC specification on the back end. The code is entirely open. You can check it out, you can criticize it, you can send issues on it. But remember, it's not production code. So that's it for the presentation. Thank you for your attention. Does anybody have questions, remarks about this? What's missing? That's a great question. To start, everything is localhost on it. So everything I've put is hard-coded to the local host with ports that are already defined, and everything in the metadata that I showed you previously is hard-coded. It is stripped down to the basics of OpenID4VC. So it means it just uses the protocol, but it doesn't add all the value that you can have, like when you check the issuer. For example, when I was showing you the proof you could see previously, which is a JWT, you can, well, I'm gonna get it. Normally it should be around here. So where is it? The proof is here. That JWT is signed with this key ID. And it has the issuer, which is the did web, without that identifier. I can go to resolve. I can resolve that did web. I can collect the certificate, which is what's specified in Gaia-X, that you're supposed to have a X5C attribute in the did web. And I can do all the checks that I want. I can check, is it an EVSSL? Is the root certificate such a thing? Is it truly someone that I trust, etc. So to answer your question, you have the hard-coded part that has to be removed and changed, and you have some logic that has to be added to really have added value in a way. And I think that's almost all you need to do, and maybe reorganize the code, because I imagine that depending on the roadmap we have, if we propose OpenID for VC, we're going to build libraries, or we're going to build something that you'll have to maybe produce 100 lines of code, and it will be out of the box compatible with OpenID for VC. Thank you. Any other questions? Yep. Friendly fire. Friendly fire.
No, I just don't remember if you mentioned the version of the drafts, just in case someone else is interested. Just to
exactly. The implementation is based on the latest drafts. So for OpenID, for VC issuance, it's draft 14, and for VP, it's draft 22, I think, or 23. I can't remember. It goes so fast. Thank you for reminding me.
1, 2. That was almost the same time.
So you mentioned that actually for most it's much easier to understand the concept of VCs when it's human to machine or a private person.
Yep.
But when we think about enterprise wallets, or would be in the cloud, obviously, do you think OpenID would be powerful enough to actually abolish anything similar to IAM in organizations? That they would actually be onboarded in an organization, and because I have a wallet as a natural person and they have one for a legal person, actually I don't need IT administration for anything but hardware.
That's a big question. To be honest, I don't know if it can abolish IAM. It could be used. Yeah, it could replace it. But you'd have to really check out. To give you an answer on that, like that, I didn't think about that use case. There can be parts of IAM that are too hard to abolish with that, I think.
Because right now, when I'm working with projects and we talk about Gaia-X compliance, any response which would come from a larger organization would be, yeah, I'm just a developer. We don't have X509. What am I supposed to do? I won't get any authentication from my company.
Well, normally if you're compliant with Gaia-X, if you expose your certificate and just follow the Gaia-X reference specification, normally you should have all that information that's available. I maybe didn't get your question.
But those employees usually can't prove that the organization is what they claim to be,
okay,
and so they would need some kind of private key holder, and then would say, okay.
You
but
mean
it's for me, for my use case, it's too complicated to contact the private key holder of my organization just to prove that I'm Gaia-X compliant. So
you mean in the case of power of attorney?
Yeah.
In a way, that case at the moment, this is really a proof of concept, technical proof of concept. As in Gaia-X, we separate the part where you have all the compliance and all the documentation in a way, and the technical part. This is really technical. We're trying to move with technicalities in a way, and we didn't have a close look at the moment at all the legal part, etc. I was looking for some solutions using DID to see if you could attach a private key, a DID, of a natural person or even a legal person that's a subsidiary or whatever of a main company. And I saw that you could build the link between DIDs and give that kind of power of attorney. But I didn't go deep enough into it. And I'm not sure at the moment it's totally possible.
Yeah. I think so. These would really help these people, because usually they are, I don't know, developers, and they could just say, okay, I'm working on this project. I need to, for example, provide Gaia-X compliance. I need power of attorney only for this use case, maybe.
Yeah.
And they can actually send the credential request to the actual private key holder.
Well, as you're saying it, I'm just thinking about it. The case of dynamic credential requests I showed, if you have a cloud wallet, an enterprise wallet, and that you give the power of attorney to an end user, to a natural person, you could give the access to the credentials, which has been issued and cryptographically bound to your main company, and they can just present it. The wallet is not going to modify it. The wallet is only going to sign the verifiable presentation. But if you ask for compliance, what you're going to send are the actual credentials that are owned and bound to the main company. So normally that use case should be covered by cloud wallets in a way.
Okay. Thank you.
Wow, great question. The questions are insane. Love that. Any other questions? We've got another awesome.
I think it's an easy one. You mentioned that there could be multiple credentials in one presentation.
Yes.
Why is that?
Why is that? I didn't write the specification, so I don't have the answer. But from what I imagine, what I didn't say is that in the response you can have credential singular or credentials as well. So both cannot live together. I chose credentials because it shows that you can have multiple. I think it's just because they give the opportunity of doing that, because in the credential request, no, it's below. But anyway, you can ask for multiple credentials at once. So if ever you need to give a credential that's linked to another one and another one, you can put everything in one request. And that's why I was discussing, I get lost. That's why we were discussing about the support of multiple credential issuance. And that's something that has been asked and that has been criticized on OpenID4VC, it's people were saying you cannot do deferred credential issuance and multiple credential issuance. It avoids going back and forth to say, okay, I want one credential, then the other, then the other. And that's an evolution that comes from the latest drafts, if I remember well. I think we had another question at the top.
At the top? Ah, sorry.
Yeah.
My bad.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm one member of Finnish ADAS team, and have you discussed on revocation, because that is to us very problematic in this OpenID4VC, because this VAT ID is very good example. If you want to have a VAT ID, you want to know is it valid today, not when it was issued. And then if you have a, or at least at the moment it sees that there is no excellent way to do this revocation.
Yeah, so revocation can be done on multiple parts of the specifications that are used in what I presented. Revocation can be done in OAuth too, but that's not answering your question. It can be done in the VC. VC data model 2, if I remember well, has a system for revocation. At the moment in Gaia-X we don't support it, but there's something with the, I can't remember, but normally in the specification of VCDM2 there's a revocation that's supported. I didn't present it in this presentation because it's out of scope, as I presented only OpenID4VC, but revocation is possible, yes. Any other question?
Actually, I have a question, and that relates to the profiles. Can you tell something what a profile is capable of specifying or adding?
Yes, a profile is going to be able, as I was saying, to give the flavor of OAuth 2 and the OpenID4VC that's used. When I talk about a flavor, it's going to be, for example, which credential format you're going to be using. Do you support VCJOT, SDJOT, both? Do you support as I was saying before, there are multiple extensions of OAuth 2, and if you start discussing with a server that uses such an RFC to secure the authorization request, and that you're sending an authorization request that uses another RFC, things are going to fail. So I cannot show you an entire profile at the moment, but you can imagine that there are about 50 parameters within a profile to be able to define how you use it.
Thanks. Any other final questions? Volunteers to make it production ready, maybe for a startup. You can sell it to the Gaia-X digital clearing houses then. Sorry. Sorry. Volunteer.
Yeah.
Volunteer. Very excellent. Yeah. I know your name. Yeah, if there are no more questions. Thanks a lot, Vincent. Yeah,
thank you,
excellent.
everyone.
Yeah, thanks for bearing with us. I hope it was technically enough for...
Yeah, there'll be a replay on YouTube soon, normally on our channel. You can look at it and just see things slower.
I dropped out at 5 minutes 20 or something like that. Yeah, you can post it.
And really have a look at the code if you want to understand how it works and reverse engineer, or even point out errors that we made. Maybe there are a few mistakes. Don't hesitate. We're really open to that. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.